Working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call into it. Every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this edition of our program Working for You, which is a production of the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service. My name is Jacqueline Bryan, and I am sitting in for Mr. Roy Williams, who usually hosts the program, but he's on vacation. You can also view this program live on Facebook. I think it's important to tell you that, yes, we're very much up with technology and we're streaming live on Facebook, so you can log into your Facebook account and look for SKNIS Media. So that's where you can find it. Over the next 5 years, the Ministry of Education plans to improve upon the White Paper on Education, Development and Policy through the implementation of the Education Sector Plan 2017 or to 2021, referred to as ESP for short. So if you hear us make mention of ESP, it stands for Education Sector Plan. And on today's program, we're going to take a closer look at how this plan will raise the standard of the delivery and management of education in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I know that is an area of particular concern to lots of residents and citizens. I'm joined by two special guests today. The first is Dr. Neva Pemberton, Chief of Education Planning, and she is going to discuss the plan's policy, goals, and program areas, as well as the strategies that will be used to meet the targets set out by the ministry. We're also joined today by Mr. Kertney Thompson, and he is going to be speaking about how the technical and vocational education and training here in St. Kitts and Nevis will be revamped through the introduction of the ESP. They're going to be introducing a St. Kitts Nevis Teva Enhancement project. And Mr. Thompson, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the St. Kitts Nevis Teva Secretariat, is our second special guest for today. So welcome to the Working for You program.
Thanks.
Let's begin with the broader initiative, which is the Education Sector Plan. What does this plan entail and what are the goals?
Okay, well, good afternoon. I want to thank you, Jacqueline, and also ZIZ for having us on the show today to allow the Ministry of Education to talk to the audience and answer any questions that may arise around the 2017 to 2021 Education Sector Plan, which is really a document that will guide education delivery and investments in the sector over the next 5 years. It also provides the overarching framework that Mr. Thompson will speak to today about in terms of the Teva Enhancement project. So you asked, why are we developing the plan? What's a little bit about the background? Well, listeners and viewers may remember the White Paper on Education Policy and Development that dates back to 2009. And this document really provided a strong vision and a blueprint for education policies over the last few years, and did also contribute to some quality improvements in the system. We saw enhancements in the early childhood education sector, and we also saw the development of the TVET, which is the shortened version of Technical Vocational Education and Training, the development of that policy as well. But overarchingly, the white paper, it really didn't have the necessary cost and finance components or a strong monitoring and evaluation framework to support it, which hindered its implementation. So on one level, at the local level, we decided, listen, we really need to put together a strategy that takes into consideration stronger monitoring and evaluation and also cost components. So that's really the local reasons behind the development of the plan. But also we're a part of the sub-region, and at the level of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States in 2012, they developed an education sector strategy as well, with the vision of every learner succeeding. And at that point, the OECS asked all members of the OECS region to reflect on their national plans, and where possible to align our national plans with that regional plan. So that was also another thrust in taking a look at what we had and trying to upgrade it. regionally, and then globally, we can take into account what's happened recently in the development of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's one particular goal for education, that's Sustainable Development Goal 4, which says that by 2030, all countries should really ensure inclusive and quality education for all and promote lifelong learning opportunities. So, taking those three levels into consideration, we decided we needed to develop a new education sector policy that built on the white paper where relevant, responded to regional and global mandates for education, while also addressing some of the gaps that we identified in education since the publication of the 2009 strategy. So that's really the why we developed the strategy, but I also think it's useful to talk to viewers a little bit about the content of the plan and how that came about.
Yes.
Yes.
So, what are we looking at where this strategy is concerned, and what can we expect over the next 5 years?
Okay. So over the next 5 years, I guess before we get to what we can expect over the next 5 years, I also really want the audience to know what went into the development of these strategies. Since about 2015.
So this is the planning you're talking about?
Yeah, this is the planning,
Yes.
the putting together of the plan. How did we arrive at the strategies?
Okay.
Because I think that that's important too. It was an incredibly collaborative process. It took us about a year and a half, and it really dates back to, I would say, around 2014 to 2015. We began the process of looking at the strengths and the weaknesses in our education system, spearheaded by the Ministry of Education, but with some assistance from donors and international partners, UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Bank. And so by the end of 2015, we had identified a set of challenges, strengths as well, but challenges that were really hindering our development. And we vetted those with a wide array of stakeholders inside the Ministry of Education, outside the Ministry of Education, both islands, St. Kitts and Nevis, and really rallied around a number of policy goals that should drive us moving forward. So that's kind of the process and how we got to where we are today. And I think it would be useful to highlight what some of those challenges were, because it's really these challenges that we've identified that shape the plan over the next 5 years. So we looked at three broad areas. The first was access and participation. And some of the major challenges that we recognize is that there had been a lack of adequate space at the early childhood education level for children ages 0 to 5, but particularly those in the age ranges of 0 to 2. We had much better participation at primary level, we still do, but when we get to secondary, we start to see some of the challenges arise again. We have much lower levels of participation at secondary level than we do at primary and at the ECE level. And in fact, there was a study done, I think it was around 2014, 2015, on out-of-school children, and about 13% of secondary school-age children are out of school or were out of school at that time. And specifically for the academic year 2014, we had 1 in 4 students, or 25%, left school before Form 5. So between Form 4 and Form 5, 25% of our students were leaving. When you think about this information and you couple it with employment statistics that really show high rates of unemployment for persons in the ages 16 to 24, that age group, which is critically our largest demographic group, it really indicates that our secondary schools are not adequately preparing learners for the world of work or higher education. And we also see this by lower levels of enrollment than we'd like at the post-secondary and tertiary levels. I think when we think about sustainable development and economic development and poverty reduction, we have to really take these serious realities into account. We need to be better preparing our learners. So that's what was happening at the secondary level. Kertney's going to speak to us about technical, vocational, and education and training, but there were a long list of challenges that were recognized by us internally and by a policy review, specifically of the Teva sector in 2014 by UNESCO. And those, I just highlight those quickly. Some of them were gender biases and subject selection at the secondary level. How many boys do we know that are taking home economics? How many girls are we motivating to take auto mechanics or engineering, for instance? There still remains a low status that's assigned to technical vocational education and training, and the misperception that it's for the less able students. We have weak links between what we offer and the needs of the labor market. And we also have not as much offer or programs at higher skill levels. So what we do offer is at a lower level. And I think one of the other challenges that we realize is the certification that students can get in technical areas, as it stands, isn't portable. So they're not going to be able to take their certification and move across the region or internationally. And so that was a challenge that we wanted to see remedied in terms of TVET as well. So those, I think, that kind of sums up the challenges that we found with access and participation. Another area that we looked at was quality and relevance. And from the analyses, there are a number of things that were constraining student learning outcomes. First, we have an underdeveloped curriculum and assessment system, whereby our prescribed learning experiences are too narrow to attain the stated outcomes or objectives of education. So let's take, for example, the creative and the cultural arts. Currently, we undervalue them in our national curriculum, despite their potential to be significant contributing sectors to the economy as elsewhere in the region. Take Jamaica, for example. And we also have an Education Act that speaks to promoting cultural empowerment in our students, yet we don't value this in our curriculum. We also don't have competency standards in place, which are those specific skills that students should learn at each grade and at each subject. And this is something that needs to be developed. When we think about assessment, the usefulness of our current national examinations, test of standards at the primary level, and the common exams at the secondary level, they've largely been called into question for their usefulness by lots of people, parents, teachers, students themselves. They carry a very high stakes environment around them as well, which is seen as problematic by many of us in the education sector. And then at the secondary level, we rely on the CXC examinations. And really, using those as the sole determinant of success at the secondary level is insufficient for two main reasons. One, CSEC, which is our benchmark of success, doesn't cater to all secondary level students. Not everybody takes CSEC. And second, even those that do and may attain 10, 12 passes, they're still not always recognized as ready for the world of work. So I think it calls into question the utility of that benchmark of success as our sole determinant of what makes a good high school graduate. Also, when we think that, and when we realize that only 70% of a secondary school cohort take the CSEC exams, where does that leave the other 30%? CXC does offer an exam called the Caribbean Certificate of Secondary Level Competence, the CCSLC, which does assess basic foundational skills that would be needed for the world of work and success after secondary school. But because we have a bias for CSEC, this CCSLC is not implemented uniformly across institutions, which then limits the currency of the exam as well. So those are some of the challenges with respect to curriculum and assessment, but we have other constraints in terms of teaching and learning as well. We don't currently have adequate academic and behavioral support students for our learners. We have too much chalk and talk in the classroom. And our efforts to date to integrate technology into teaching and learning hasn't been as let's say, successful as we had hoped it to be, despite significant investment by the ministries to make that work. So that's the context of teaching and learning, but also in terms of our teachers themselves. We have challenges with teacher supply, teacher development, and management of teachers, which constrains quality teaching and learning. We need to improve the recruitment of teachers and the retention of qualified teachers. And once we have the qualified teachers, when we think about equity, we need to make sure that they're fairly spread out within and between our institutions. We've had instances when we look at the data that some schools in the past may have 80% trained teachers, while another may only have 20. That's not really fair. Similarly, within schools, there's been the history of sometimes putting our best teachers with our best students and our weakest teachers with our most struggling students. And if you're trying to level the playing field, we should look at how qualified teachers are dispersed, since we know that the quality of teaching and the quality of teachers significantly impacts student learning. So that's quality. Those are two areas. The third area that we looked at was governance and management and what we can do to make things more efficient. And some of the challenges that we recognized are that our approach to policy development hasn't been as coordinated or well coordinated as it could be, which has resulted in the absence of some important key policies. For instance, we haven't had a policy on equity. We're just speaking about distribution of teachers. It's important to know what we can do to make our system more equitable to benefit the majority of students. And equity also speaks to between our islands too. What are the practices that are happening on one versus the other? And how can we make sure that things are being as fair as possible? Also, our planning for resources, material resources, human resources, financial resources, we haven't really taken historically a long-range view. So we've been planning for the short to the medium term, partly because the data that we have available to us was segmented and not well coordinated. So our data-driven decision-making has suffered a little bit. We have recently procured an online education management information system called OpenSys, which is now doing a much better job of helping us get the information we need in real time to make better decisions. And lastly, I think this is probably felt throughout the government service and in the private sector, but there's always the need to improve leadership and accountability. And that's something that we recognized in the education sector as well. So I know it's a long list of challenges, but the good news is that we do have an education sector plan that addresses and targets these challenges head on.
But before you move on to that, I have some questions about some of the challenges, which I was going to ask about later, but since you raised them, to help people better understand some of the things you made reference to, that I think would have left a lot of, why is that in the minds of our listeners and viewers? For example, you spoke about a percentage of students not moving on to fifth form or not in school. What's the reason for that?
We're going to get to it in the strategies, but I'll tell you now. I think, historically we've had a practice, and I wouldn't call it a policy, but a practice of having a quote-unquote school-leaving group. So those students who teachers or the education system deems unable to take CSEC exams in Form 5 become this quote-unquote school-leaving group. So it's been a sanctioned exit. But they're exiting the system with what? Take to the job market that they can then use to get into higher education. And I'm sure they have skills. I don't mean that they don't have skills, but are they documented? What kind of qualifications do they have to show that they're ready for the next step? So that was that's the major reason why we see the drop off between Form 4 and Form 5. So one of the strategies that we will be pursuing over the planned period is to stop that practice from happening by putting policies in place and ensure that all students go from Form 1 to Form 5. Unless, of course, we have savants that have attained all the standards of success by Form 3 or Form 4, then we're not going to hold you. But if you haven't attained what you need for the next stage in life, we're going to try to give that to you at the secondary level. And there's a number of strategies that we have in place to facilitate that.
You also made reference to competency standards and saying that there were no competency or harmonized competency standards in place. What is currently being used?
Sure. So the Curriculum Development Unit has a set of national curriculum documents that outlines subjects, that outlines some scope and some sequencing, so when should these topics be taught, that offers a set of resources. But when I say competency standards, these should be specific statements. For example, what should a first grader be able to do in language arts at the end of term 1? It's something very concrete. We call them can-do skills. So what's absent are those kinds of statements, and I think we need them because it provides a very clear structure for how teachers would then teach, how students would then be assessed, and how parents then can truly understand what is it that my child can do, because I think that's what, at least for me as a parent, that's what I want to know.
And I guess if that was introduced, then you can also determine what is it we need to do for this child if they have not met these particular standards.
Absolutely. And when we get into some of the strategies, strengthening student support services, making sure that we, as early as possible, identify those students that aren't meeting the benchmark, implement then the right kinds of services they need. Maybe it's academic support, maybe it's psychological support, maybe it's behavioral support, maybe it's a breakfast at school, but we have to see what kinds of services we can offer learners to enable them to do their best in terms of learning.
You also said that only 70% of high school students would write CSEC examinations. Is that correct?
A cohort. So of those, because remember we have a large number that are leaving between Form 4 and Form 5.
Yes.
So if you look at the Form 5 cohort for a particular year, so those that came in at first form and made it all the way to fifth form, it's roughly only about 70% that came in at first form that are sitting CSEC in the fifth form.
So I guess that 30% would comprise the ones that didn't make it to fifth form?
Right.
And then once you get to fifth form, would there be anything that prevents you from sitting your CSEC skills? I mean, apart from acts of that you have no control over.
No, I mean, I think unfortunately the system has done a disservice to students by weeding them out. You know, I think the idea is if you get to fifth form, then you're deemed worthy of doing the CSEC exam. So it's really those that aren't making it or leaving before. And I really don't ever like to use the term dropout, because they're not dropped out, they're pushed, you know, or easily escorted, you know, for lack of a better way of saying it.
And finally, what I wanted elaboration on before we moved on, the issues with using technology more. What has been some of the challenges with, you said, I think it's, from what we know, that's what has been published, things that have been reported on, and probably from what you know, we can agree, I think, that a large contribution or investment has been made in this area. Yeah. So what are some of the things that have prevented it from really rolling out or coming on stream like intended?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One, infrastructure isn't so great. So, you know, we may buy the laptops and put them in the schools, but we don't have the connectivity that we need. There's been lots of investment in trying to make that happen, but it just hasn't worked out quite to date. So we have infrastructural problems. I think also it's a case where, you know, sometimes teachers teach students, but students can also teach teachers. And I know my 5-year-old is much better on his technology. He shows me all kinds of things, you know. So I think sometimes we have a gap too, you know, a skills gap where the teachers are less comfortable with the technology than some of the students are. We saw that in some surveys that we did. So I think that's a challenge. If you don't feel comfortable in using it, that's a problem. And I also think that we need a policy. I mean, one of the strategies that we'll be talking about is the development of an ICT integration policy for education that specifically outlines how technology can and should be used, what are the right support mechanisms. And without that, sometimes it can be seen as the cart before the horse, you know. So things have been placed, but how are these supposed to work together? What are the expectations of teachers and students? And also, what are some of the security risks and things that we need to take into consideration too? I mean, there's so much social media that should be harnessed for education, but there's also so many ways in which it can be misused. So I think there's lots of cybersecurity issues. There's lots of things that need to be thought about before we're able to really see the benefit of the technology take root, once it's supported by the right kind of infrastructure as well.
Well, this study seems to have been very comprehensive, and clearly there's so many things to take into consideration. How can this plan, you're going to tell us now, how this plans on addressing them all?
Yeah. All right. You ready?
Ready.
Okay.
I hope they're ready. I know they're ready.
Viewers, are you ready? Because I'm going to be ready for the questions. So there's 3 overarching policy goals for the education sector plan. The first is that we improve equitable access to and participation in education at all levels. So some of the strategies that we have, first is going to be increasing the number of early childhood education spaces and strengthening the training that we give to home-based providers, so that at the end of the plan period, we can sufficiently say that there is universal access to early childhood development services and a combination of public and private centers. Compulsory education doesn't begin until the age of 5, and we have a vibrant, thriving private sector at the early childhood level. So it's going to be important to see how can we expand this sector in a way that respects the private sector and brings everyone up to a certain set of quality standards. At the secondary level, we're going to try to increase retention, and we're going to do that by improving our student support services that I mentioned earlier, so the kinds of learning support that we have in place, behavior support, career guidance, and the like. And also by expanding what we offer at the secondary level. I think sometimes students get disenchanted, disillusioned with what's available to them. So we really have to diversify what we offer at the secondary level. And then take policy action, as I mentioned, to discontinue the practice of having Form 4 students leave. No more school leaving group, okay? And if we do this, then we can ensure meaningful access and participation for all secondary school students through Form 5. Mr. Thompson is going to talk to us a little bit more about the Teva Enhancement project, but we do have as another goal to ensure that all students can access TVET competencies. By TVET competencies, we mean things like problem solving, critical thinking, employability skills throughout compulsory education. What we need to stop doing is having academics in one box and technical in another box. That never creates parity of esteem. One's always going to be seen as less than. So what we have TVET as a cross-cutting theme throughout the strategy to really show that all forms of education are equally valuable and that all students should be able to make choices based on their interests, etc. So he'll talk to us a little bit more about the TVET Enhancement Project and how we intend to, through the project, develop a relevant and a gender-responsive TVET system that's in high demand. We also, equity is another one of the cross-cutting themes we have for the strategy in line with Sustainable Development Goal 4. And one of the things that we need to look at is how does the influence of our practice of academic streaming, wholesale academic streaming. We have Form 1A1 to Form 1A G and H in some of our secondary schools, and even at some of our primary schools. How does that process, or that practice, and also the practice of automatic promotion, social promotion, being promoted up and up and up and up and up, irrespective of the skills that you may have demonstrated. How does that really impact on equity in terms of access to quality teaching and learning? So that's some research that we intend to undertake over the plan period, and then make some policy decisions based on that. We're going to, again, with thinking about equity, look at how we can implement appropriate services for our vulnerable populations that are not currently being served or not adequately being served. I think that's fair to say. For example, we'll be putting in place English as second language programs for our English language learners. We have growing numbers of people from the Dominican Republic and elsewhere for whom English is not their first language. So how are we catering for them? They have a right to education, and the answer isn't to put them in the lowest academic stream. I mean, I can't speak any other languages. I shouldn't be penalized for that, you see? And we're also going to make sure, in thinking about inclusion, that we develop the necessary special education policies and equip our schools with the infrastructure and the resources that are necessary to better serve our special needs students, and to, wherever possible, make sure that they're included in our mainstream schools. So moving forward, we hope to get to the place where only those with the most extreme special education needs would receive services in the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School or in Neva's in the Cicely Brown Integrated School. And at higher education, we seek to really improve coordination between the ministry and higher education providers, so that way we can facilitate access. So those are some of the strategies we have for access. In terms of quality, the goal itself is to strengthen the quality and relevance of education at all levels with a focus on improving student learning outcomes. That's the number one goal. We want to see as many students as possible do their very best. So in order to do that, we are going to be developing and implementing a revised national curriculum and assessment system that will allow students to develop holistic set of competencies for the 21st century. This will mean reviewing and revising our current set of national assessments. So over the next few years, test of standards as we know it, the common examinations as we know it, will likely change shape based on these frameworks. And these frameworks will make very clear what are the competency standards, what is our core. These are all fundamental questions. We've taken for granted that we know what our core subjects are, and we state them as 4: language, social studies, science, and math. But do those 4 subjects give us everything we need to develop the kind of graduate we want for the 21st century, the ideal Caribbean person, for instance? So part of what the assessment framework will also say is, what is our graduation criteria? It's something that's been largely absent. We've relied on the CSEC examinations, but we need to say, as a country, what is it that we want to see? And then how do we make sure that we allow all of our students to work towards that and be assessed in that respect? And then we can say to employers, stop asking for 5 CSEC subjects, including math and English. Ask for this. This is what you want. This will give you the kind of employee at an entry level that you're looking for. So that's one. We also intend to implement and monitor safety and quality standards in all of our institutions. So we'll be putting into place, and work has begun on this already, but a school safety and a security policy, as well as a quality teaching and learning framework. We can't take for granted that we know what quality teaching or what quality learning should look like. So we want to make all of these things as explicit as possible. And with respect to student support services at the ministry level, we really intend to develop a well-resourced student support services unit that will enable the ministry to serve schools and all students who have specific special needs to support their learning, and also training to school staff and how to support a wide range of students. So that way all students can have what they need to do their best. We have two important boards. Well, one's a board, one's a secretariat. And actually, two are secretariats, but one has a board attached to it, one has a council, that provide quality assurance at the post-secondary level. So we're going to be trying to strengthen the St. Kitts and Nevis Accreditation Board and Secretariat, as well as the Teva Council, which Kertney will be talking about. Teachers. So what are we going to do for teachers? We talked a lot about quality in the classroom. We really want to see an improvement in the percentage of qualified teachers in the system. Not necessarily that much within this plan period, but in the next plan period. So let's say over the next 10 years, we want to see the percentage of qualified teachers significantly increase. So to do that, we're going to collaborate with the CFBC and all of the other relevant partners to develop the framework for mandatory pre-service training, so that within 10 years, no teacher will enter the classroom without having been trained beforehand, which is different to our current practice. Currently, they come in untrained, they stay in the classroom for about 2 years, and then they matriculate to the CFBC. So it's a big paradigm shift, and we hope that over the next 5 years we can get all of the parameters in place, so that way within 10 years we can implement this system. We also want to try to strengthen the professionalism, the professional feeling of the teaching force. And one of the ways that we're looking at doing that is collaborating with the teachers' union and the Human Resource Department to develop a national teaching council that would manage the day-to-day affairs of teachers and their interests in collaboration with the union, and also to develop what we're calling a professional development framework. So that way when you enter teaching or enter education, what's your career trajectory? How can you move up? What can you do? What kinds of professional development opportunities should you maintain to continue being considered a qualified teacher, just like other professions where you have to have a certain number of continuing professional development credits. So I think, if we take on this suite of strategies, we're certain to see improvements in student learning outcomes. The third and the final goal, and then Kertney will talk a little bit about the TVET project, is we also want to enhance governance, planning, and management to improve efficiency and effectiveness throughout the sector. And to really achieve this goal, we have strategies that include introducing technologies and data management tools that will better improve our long-term resource planning and our evidence-based decision-making. So financial databases, human resource databases, a fancy thing called a simulation model, which helped us to figure out all of our targets for this strategy. Takes into consideration all kinds of demographic information, budgetary information. So using these tools to help us really have a long-range view. I mentioned earlier the school information system, the web-based system called OpenSys. That really is going to help us in this data-driven decision-making. And we have that. Teachers have already been trained, not all, but a few from every school. And we're rolling that out this quarter already, so there's been some work here. And we expect that even the attendance data that we'll get alone will enable us to do much, much more robust data management in the short term. And then we want to also improve knowledge management and the policy action that I talked about earlier as a challenge. So we're going to ensure that our education legislation is aligned with our policy mandates, and wherever possible, raise the awareness of the public around what existing policies the Ministry of Education has in place. There are a few key policies that we intend to develop also over the next 5 years, and one would be the policy on equity. Another is a policy on resource management and data management. And then we also have to address some key personnel issues. So succession planning, how do we make sure we have continuity in terms of human resources, and teacher training, as well as professional development. We're going to take efforts to also strengthen accountability and leadership. So we'll ensure that all personnel in the Ministry of Education and at our education and training institutions have relevant job descriptions. We probably should have done that yesterday, but we're going to get it done now. And also implement leadership standards and training for our ministry and school personnel on effective leadership. And make sure that when we're assessing institutions and personnel, that we're doing it in a standard, objective manner. And I think there are two other pieces. One is that, education management is largely centralized and will remain so. So it's done from the Ministries of Education and St. Kitts and counterpart in Nevis. But we do want to see more participatory management wherever possible. So we're going to be guided by the Education Act and then try to implement some of the entities or bodies that haven't been called to service yet. So for instance, the National Parent-Teacher Association, a National Student Council, an Early Childhood Council, and then trying to reinvigorate some entities that have already been formed but haven't necessarily been as effective as they could be. There's been lots of work on the TVET Council already, and also our Education Advisory Board. And we all know that money matters. So the last, and I think one of the most important things, is that we're really going to try to better monitor the use of our financial resources in terms of our budget objectives. Each year we have these budget objectives, and we say we're going to meet these key performance indicators, and the money that's allocated we should be able to see how well we're doing with that. So that's another way that we're going to try to strengthen governance. So that, in a nutshell, are the strategies that we will take on over the next 5 years to improve access and participation, quality and relevance, and governance.
That is quite a bit. Probably should have been a 20-year plan. But I understand everything will be done in stages. Yeah. And I guess after the 5 years, you'll assess and move forward. And at some point, we'll talk about the monitoring and evaluation. Sure. That's a part of this plan. But this is the part where we move on to talk about technical and vocational education and training, also referred to as TVET, which has been mentioned several times by Dr. Pemberton, and is also mentioned several times in the education sector plan. So, Mr. Thompson, before you get into the role of TVET in all of this and the plan changes to TVET, because on last week's program, we had Mr. Christopher from AVEC, and he made reference to some of those. And you're going to give us in more detail. I'm very curious to find out about the council, the St. Kitts Nevis TVET Council, and you're based at the Secretariat. So tell us a little bit about that first.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jackie and ZIZ, for having us here this afternoon. To go quite right to the question that you asked about the council, the St. Kitts Nevis TVET Council is the body that is responsible for the coordination of technical and vocational education within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. It is a body that's set up through the Education Act of 2005, so it's mandated in law. I'm at the Secretariat, which is the executing arm for the TVET Council. So all the work of the council, everything that they do in terms of managing and coordinating TVET systems and TVET training within St. Kitts and Nevis, certification process of learners, we're going to be the one responsible for executing all of the work for them. Just like we have on the accreditation board, there's a secretariat for that as well that really does the work for each of these boards.
Now, tell us about the TVET Enhancement Project.
Okay. Before I get directly into the TVET Enhancement Project, which is a critical project for us in St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Pemberton addressed some of the issues that we've had in our education and training system within St. Kitts and Nevis. Access to quality education, access to quality training, participation, quality assurance, and those type of things. Those are some of the same problems we face specifically in the area of technical and vocational education. So this project was put together really to address a lot of the issues that we have. We have quite a large percentage of our folks leaving secondary school between 4th and 5th form. They leave without any recognized certification. They leave without any qualification that allow them to really be able to get quality employment. And so we have a lot of folks out there who are working on jobs and don't currently have any type of certification, don't have any formal training. And so with this project then, we get to fill in that gap. This project is really a combination of about $8 million US. It's mostly a grant provided by the Caribbean Development Bank, but in conjunction with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, who is also contributing another 20% on top of that in funding. The project really has 5 components, and these 5 components are to focus on the institutional framework for governance and management of a TVET system. which currently the Secretariat and the Council is responsible for managing of TVET systems. Well, this project is going to help to strengthen that process. The enhancement of the learning environment. Currently, we have a lot of our schools, the facilities are not up to par, too small. Some of the facilities really need to be expanded so we can get more space. So those are things that we're going to do as part of this project. Enhance the capacity for delivery of TVET. A lot of our current teachers lack the ability to really deliver TVET from a trainer standpoint. They know the material, they went to university, got degrees and these type of things. They've probably gone to teacher training college and become trained teachers, but lack the ability to teach it from a technical and vocational standpoint, using what we call CBET, competency-based education and training methodology, which would really help them to train the trainees in the proper way. The other one is the management of TVET institutions. The leadership at TVET institutions, secondary, post-secondary, that is severely lacking. And so we're really embarking on trying to ensure that we improve the management of TVET institutions. In fact, we have a number of our principals who should be going to Italy shortly to pursue some training in the management of institutions. Another component is actually support for at-risk learners. And the last and final area deals with a review of the PEP, which is now called STEP, the complete review of the PEP STEP program. Those are the 5 major components. Now, after completing this project, there's a lot of outcomes that we expect. Ultimately, we expect to have a recognized TVET system where our learners, where our students or citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis will be able to get the proper training, the right way, certified, and be able to find reasonable work. This is not a system that we're going to just throw students out without recognized certification, you know. And ultimately, that is what this program is geared to provide them. Now, under the project, there's a number of activities that we're going to do under this project. We have a number of consultancy services that will help us to set up the entire TVET system. The quality assurance consultancy that we're supposed to be embarking on will help us to set up the quality assurance system, quality assurance manual, processes and procedures. All of that will be laid out under that system. We also have a support for the operational effectiveness of the TVET Secretariat. This is going to help the Secretariat and the Council be able to manage the TVET system properly, using a lot of the same guidelines that are set up in other countries within the regions, like Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, those countries that are already offering CVQ to their nationals. We want to get to that point, and by going through this process will definitely help us get there to be able to award CVQs to our nationals of St. Kitts and Nevis. CVQs being Caribbean vocational qualification that then would allow them to be able to move freely within the CARICOM region. Monitoring and evaluation is always a big thing, and that's another consultancy that is coming on board, coming on stream. The monitoring and evaluation system is going to help us to provide data to be able to make decisions about planning the type of programs and those type of things that are needed within the Federation. There's also other components that includes study tours and attachments. Study tour, because we're moving towards the establishment of a training environment where we can provide CVQs. We don't want to just go into it blindly. So we're going to send a number of our folks overseas to look at the operations in Jamaica, Trinidad. Grenada is of particular importance to us because they're small like us. They're within the OECS sub-region. Their secretariat is going to be staffed similar to how the amount of persons we have. So we're looking closer at probably visiting Grenada. Let's see how they operate, because they're currently a CVQ awarding country. But we're not just doing it at the secretariat level or the council level. We're doing it for teachers and principals in our schools. They would have to go overseas as well and look at how it's done to offer CVQ at secondary schools. We don't want folks to just come out of high school with just CSEC subjects. We already know about 25 to 30% of them are not even taking CSEC. They're leaving at Form 4. So we need to have something available for them. Now, it's not just for that group, because, don't get me wrong, folks have the perception that TVET is for those folks who are being easily maneuvered out of school. It's really not just for those. It's for those 70% who are also taking those CSEC subjects, provided with proper job training opportunities, certification that they can get employment after school. There is a number of other things embedded within this project. Implementation support for programming at TVET, Secretariat level. Generally, TVET has a stigma of being second class. We're going to embark on an aggressive marketing campaign to really change that stigma. Folks have to understand that TVET has to be the driver of economic development in St. Kitts and Nevis. And for that to happen, we have to understand that TVET doesn't take second class to CSEC. My personal view is that it should be higher, but at least on par. Because someone who wants to go into medicine and those things, yes, they have to take those type of academic related subjects. But what about folks who wants to fix a car? What about those folks who in IT? That's technical. In fact, when we look at most of the subjects at secondary level, we said roughly 90% of them are actually TVET related subjects. And if you look at the occupational standards that exist within the Caribbean for job opportunities, you have TVET occupational standards for practically almost every area. If you're doing business, there are occupational standards for a business person. Front office operators, accountants, all of these things, those are TVET related subjects. But folks may not necessarily look at them that way. But we have to educate folks on the importance of those and why we have to look at them differently. One other thing is really for us to have a gender responsive career counseling program. Dr. Pemberton mentioned earlier that we don't really see a lot of females taking training in such things as automotive, what folks would call those hard trades. And at the same time, I remember back in my day in high school where I had one guy in our class who was taking typing, and we called him all sorts of names. But when I moved into college, I wish I had taken the typing course rather than pecking on my fingers. Well, we want to get the guys to move into some of these what we used to call traditional female courses as well. But I'm always happy when I see females moving into some of these traditional male-dominated positions. In fact, I was in Germany recently, and we went to visit a school that was off some vocational school, and roughly 40% of the trainees there were females, doing automotive, aviation repair, and all of those things. Just yesterday, surprisingly, I was driving down through the pond site area, and I saw a lady doing some construction work, and I actually smiled and felt good, because now I actually sight in St. Kitts for the first time. And there's probably more, but I actually saw her on the side of the road with a shovel in her hand doing some masonry work. But those are the type of things that we want to be able to do as part of this program. Ensure that females have access. They have to understand the benefit. Yes, you may want to go into an office, go into the bank and be a teller, but is that really going to provide the type of economic support that you need for you and your family? And ultimately, folks are going to take the training either because they just love it or because they're really looking for an opportunity to support themselves and their family. And so the benefits going to have to be highlighted to these folks as well. One of the other areas I mentioned was the review of the PEP STEP program. That is a consultancy service that is about to start, because we really have to review the program and ensure it's sustainable and make sure that it's provided the right level of training and certification to those folks who are currently on STEP. Those are definitely 5 components.
I'm interested to know that if there's a plan moving forward for persons who enter high school to decide, I want to either do CSEC or CVQ.
Well, there's currently no plan, but I don't see any reason for someone to do one or the other. I really believe it should be able to do. In fact, some of the CSEC subjects now has CVQ component in those CVQs. So while they may not be in those subjects, so while they may not be able to complete an entire CVQ, they can at least complete unit competencies. I know industrial arts is one of those subjects, technical drawing area. So they should be able to do that. Now, our TVET policy, which once we are fully operational here and get all our systems in place, said that every student completing high school should complete with at least one CVQ or NVQ, which is National Vocational Qualification. So once we fully do this, then even our folks going in and coming out of high school should be able to have at least one CVQ, at least at level 1.
So like Dr. Pemberton said, it should be a balance of both.
It should be.
Not you tick this box or you tick that box. Okay. Well, you didn't speak to the amalgamation of TVET institutions, and we've been waiting to hear about that since last week. So what information can you tell us in that regard?
But the amalgamation of a TVET institution is a critical component that we need to undertake. In 2015, we had a consultant who came in and did a rationalization of our TVET systems. And some of the problems we had, we understood, we knew what they were before. We had overlapping programs, redundancy of programs, we had no real coordination, no proper certification mechanisms. So we had to look at what needs to be done. Currently we have AVEC as our premier post-secondary institution. We had Project Strong, it's no longer there, but the functionalities should still exist. We have National Skills Training Program, which is not an institution, it's a program that offers some flexible type training, those functionalities, but we used to overlap with some of the things at Project Strong and AVEC. And then we had PEP, which had their own training mechanisms, their own set of folks in community centers across the country. So basically 4 programs in institution that we look and say, no, we have to streamline this. And you streamline for a number of reasons. Cost effectiveness, ensure we have quality control, quality assurance, make sure that the processes are in place. So a committee has been set up within the Ministry of Education, and we're discussing how this institution should be. So you would see, currently we have a placeholder name that we call a National Training Institute, which would include the functionality of AVEC currently, the functionality of NSTP, which is the coordination of non-formal and formal training, flexible programs, those pre-vocational courses that were offered at Project Strong and those things, and whatever training component that was offered through STEP now offered under this amalgamated institution. What we're trying to do here is basically create a premier post-secondary institutions offering level 1 and level 2 programs, and ultimately some level 3 in some of the areas as well. Now, that's just for the St. Kitts side of it, because there's also on Nevis. We have to provide the same thing on Nevis, but we're smaller. There's a smaller population, and there's no need with an island 2 miles apart for us to build out all the infrastructure to be exactly the same. So we're going to do some work at the multipurpose center on Nevis. In fact, when it's done, we're going to have some major construction taking place at the multipurpose center. And it's going to provide, when we're done, we provide connectivity, video conferencing capabilities between the NSTP, not the NSP, I'm sorry, the National Training Institute here on St. Kitts, as well as the multipurpose center piece on Nevis. So if I want to take a course in hospitality and I'm on Nevis and it's offered at 2 p.m. and someone is teaching on St. Kitts, I don't have to catch a boat to come to St. Kitts. I go to the multipurpose center in Nevis and be able to take the course, just like it's an online course, but only doing it in real time.
Is the technical vocational arm of the CFBC college going to remain where it is?
The CFBC portion will stay where it is. While this project will provide a lot of enhancement to their programs, a lot of tools and equipment and so on to their programs, they are the college, and they provide the level 3 and above, level 3 and level 4 and level 5 programs. And level 1 is some areas that may not be offered through the National Training Institute.
So the National Training Institute pretty much can prepare you to move on to Teva.
Absolutely.
We have to take some time now for me to let our listeners and viewers know that if you have questions, comments, suggestions, or queries, now is the time to put them to our guests. The numbers to dial are 465-2555, and that's the local number. So if you're here in St. Kitts and Nevis, or maybe in the region, and you would like to make a suggestion of something that's of how it's done in your country, or maybe you have questions about how we do it here in St. Kitts and Nevis, feel free to dial that number as well. The area code is 869. The number again is 465-2555. And if you are a national living abroad, we have a U.S. line that you can dial. That number is 718-577-2916. The number again is 718-577-2916. If there's any question you have about the changes that they plan to make in the education sector plan or the Teva Enhancement project, you can put those to Dr. Pemberton or Mr. Thompson. I understand some work has already been done in both areas. Mr. Thompson, maybe we can begin with you. What has taken place so far?
Well, quite a lot has taken place. We launched this project in July of 2016, and a lot of work has gone into the procurement of consultants to do. Currently, we have the review of PEP about to start, so we have that consultancy already locked down. We also have a consultancy for at-risk learners, differentiated instruction.
Next week.
In fact, the person's coming next week.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting on the contract for the person who's supposed to be doing PEP. We are about to also sign another contract for someone who's doing the operational effectiveness of the Teva Secretariat. We just opened the technical reports for something that I didn't talk about earlier, the design and the construction piece that is going to take place on the Teva Enhancement project. I mentioned that we're going to do some work at the multipurpose center, but we're going to spend probably about $6 million on upgrades to the multipurpose center in Nevis, a full technical wing at the Gingerland Secondary Schools. We're going to be adding about 3 buildings to AVEC current location, and a number of rehabs in some of the high schools for the Teva areas. So we just opened a technical proposal for the consultants to deal with that piece as well. There are a number of things that is already out there that we're receiving expressions of interest on for literacy and numeracy, which is supposed to help our Teva teachers teach literacy and numeracy embedded as a component within the technical subjects. The monitoring evaluation component also is out there for expressions of interest. And we just post for invitation to bid on about $2.5 million US worth of tools and equipment that is going to go to all of our secondary schools. We also have HFLE resources that is supposed to go along with for the at-risk youth component. That's the area that I'm not too familiar with, but I tell you.
And HFLE stands for
Health and Family Life Education.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can speak a little bit
Okay.
to that, just to that component of the project.
Sure.
We work on the project together. So to strengthen student support services under the project, there are a number of activities that have already begun and that will be undertaken. Mr. Thompson just mentioned the resources for health and family life education. So we've procured a number of teacher resources and student resources in terms of textbooks and workbooks, and also supplementary material to help teachers teach health and family life education, which is skills-based education at both the primary and the secondary level. We will also be procuring the necessary educational assessments and screening tools so we can better see what kinds of services some of our students need as well. And there are a number of other components the differentiated instruction, I think, being the most salient and imminent. And so we have a team of persons that are going to come in between next week. The first mission will be next week and span all the way until I think February or March of next year. And the idea is on the first mission, the team comes in and does an assessment of how well we're differentiating instruction. So differentiated instruction means you have a class full of learners at different ability levels, and how well is the teacher being able to reach each one of those learners where they are, rather than parsing them up. How can we serve them all in one classroom? So there'll be classroom observations at our primary and our secondary schools, focus groups with parents, interviews and focus groups at the college to see how well differentiated instruction is being taught as a pedagogy for our new teachers, and to see what kind of institutional capacity we need to develop to support differentiated instruction. Based on all of that research over the course of 1 week on both islands, the team will then put together a manual, a differentiated instruction training manual that's specifically tethered to our local context and our needs. There'll be then a training of trainers on how to use that manual in January, and then the expectation is that based on the recommendations from the institutional capacity portion, the Ministry of Education will come up with a plan to make sure all of our teachers are trained and implementing differentiated instruction. In fact, it's a target in our education strategy that by the end of 5 years, every single classroom effectively uses differentiated instruction to support inclusion and better learning practices. So, the idea is we won't see the kind of Teva system we need if we don't provide the right kinds of support services. Mm-hmm. It's also a conditionality of the loan that this, and it went hand in hand. We were thinking about it, and the Caribbean Development Bank, which is helping to fund this, also was thinking about it, keeping all students in school until Form 5. Mm-hmm. So if we don't put these kinds of support services in place, we won't be able to keep those students and serve them well. So, we're making sure that the project is giving us what we need to help us maintain meaningful participation until Form 5.
There's just one other area of things that has currently been on the way. Mm-hmm. We currently have actually 2 of our teachers at UTEC in Jamaica pursuing bachelor's degree in industrial arts, which is a component that is going to help in our classrooms. And we will be looking for more teachers to send overseas. For some are going to be short-term courses, welding, auto mechanic, electrical engineering, but more of our folks are going to be going overseas to get upskill, to be able to deliver the competencies in the classroom as well.
What you said, Dr. Pemberton, about teachers being trained before entering the classroom, will that also apply to TVET training? Is it that if I have this skill, do I need to first be trained to teach before entering the classroom?
Absolutely. You see, you have to be hired within the ministry first. Now, we're going to have to look for qualified teachers, and we're going to be offering a lot of training to our teachers in CBET. So while they may go to the Teachers Training College, we're still going to also provide competency-based education and training. So I would think down the road, once we said no teacher will be hired without having been trained in teacher training, whatever the process is really called. I'm not that versed in that piece, to be honest, but then they would have to be trained that way before they can go into the classroom. And they have to have the competency skills for the actual area. Yeah. We don't want someone to just go in and teach at a CSEC level or CVQ level, but they have just a CSEC education. You need to have at least one level above that as well. And that's one of the requirements that we in the TVET area have.
I was just going to add, because I think it's an important question that you're asking, and we have to do some work on definitions. What does it mean to be a qualified teacher? Right now we have a certain set of definitions. It means go to Teachers Training College and go through the associate level degree program that's offered via UE, and that's sufficient for what we're delivering now. But as we modify, as we expand, as we embrace change to secure the future, which is the theme of this strategy, we have to start thinking, well, what does it mean to be qualified in particular areas? And maybe we see that what it takes to be qualified as a particular high-level instructor in TVET would be a different set of qualifications than a secondary level teacher, which would be a different set of qualifications than a primary teacher, rather than, putting a blanket statement on this is what it means to be trained. So I think when we're developing these professional development frameworks, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we want, and how do we get that at each level for each offer that we have?
Mr. Thompson had said that his project launched in July of last year,
Yes.
but I know that your launch is coming up.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can tell us about that when you're telling us about some of the things that have already been done or currently underway or coming up shortly.
Sure. Well, 2017 has been fraught with finalizing the details of the plan. We've had some technical assistance in putting the plan together, and most recently the document is being given a beautiful professional layout and cover image and those kinds of things at UNESCO. So 2017 has really been, like, as I said, putting the final touches on. Also, because the plan begins in 2017 and goes to 2021, we haven't waited to begin with implementation. So we've started the process of operational planning. So we have the strategy for 5 years, but then that's cascaded down into a yearly operational plan. So at the ministry level, we'll say what are the key targets we want to meet this year, and then each division has either begun the process or will begin the process of developing their work plan for the year in line with the ministry. In fact, last week I had a 2-day strategic planning session with my staff at the Education Planning Division to come up with our operational plan for 2018. And it's intended that these operational plans at the ministry level then inform school improvement plans. So a lot of work has been done in the planning. A lot of work has gone into budget estimates and making sure that we can try to garner the financial resources we need, both for capital projects, consultancies, et cetera, and also recurrent expenditure to support the program. And most recently, planning the launch. So we will be launching the education sector plan. And I think I said this, but I'm going to say this again. The theme of the education sector plan is education for all, embracing change and securing the future. We cannot continue business as usual if we want to make the changes that we have in store. So the plan will be launched on November the 17th, federally, at Ocean Terrace Inn at 9:30. It's not open to the public. It is going to be open to a wide range of stakeholders. I think right now our list is at about 200 between both islands, to make sure that all of those who participated in putting the plan together are going to be there. And we will also sometime in December have a similar launch in Nevis as well. So that's kind of what we've done to date, and then we have lots of activities scheduled for 2018.
Well, we're almost nearing the end of the program. This is a last call, final chance, final opportunity for persons who may have questions or suggestions about the Teva Enhancement Project or the education sector plan to call in while we have Dr. Pemberton and Mr. Thompson here. They've shared so much information. I think they've pretty much answered a lot of the questions we would have had, and hopefully I would have been able to come up with some of the questions that you would have had. But if there are any areas that are still unclear, you can dial 465-2555 or 718-577-2916. What are the timelines for some of these things? Is there any specific timelines you can share with us just yet? I know earlier you referred to some of the things coming up in 2018. Mm-hmm. You don't have to give us all of them, but in the near future, near medium term.
Sure. I mean, some of the things that we already have funding for that we know will take place is at the early childhood level with support from UNICEF to do the kind of cost-benefit analysis to see how to expand the sector. So we should see that happening. I've begged at budget, and I've also had conversations with other funders to make sure we get the resources we need for the curriculum and assessment framework. Without that, we won't see the gains that we need at the end of the five-year period. So that's a priority for 2018, to make sure we set up what is it that we want out of our curriculum and our assessment systems and the policies, so that way we can develop those competency standards. I think those, and then also making sure that we have the technology we need in place and training to make OpenSys, that student information system, really take hold. So I think those are the three top priorities that we know we're going to gain some traction on in 2018. And as I mentioned earlier, with the right budgetary support, the list goes on and on and on.
Timelines you
Well,
can share with us, Mr. Thompson?
From a Teva standpoint, we have a lot that is going to take place in 2018. In fact, most of these consultancies we talk about will come to an end in 2018. And so it would allow for a lot of the systems to be in place. The operation effectiveness of the Secretariat should be completed by June of 2018. We have the PEP review should be finished by end of fourth quarter next year. Monitoring and evaluation should be done by June of 2018. But in 2018, we also have a lot of training that has to go along with these things. Training for assessors and verifiers. We will also have competency-based education and training done in 2018. It will go over into 2019, but we'll definitely start and get a pool of trainers in 2018. And persons going away to study will also continue into 2018. We will also have, in 2018, the plan is supposed to be for the amalgamation to take place by September of 2018. We should actually start the process of actually enrolling students within I'll use the term AVEC for now, but within AVEC, using different schedules and those things, you know. And Christopher was here last week and he talked about the current schedule, probably talk about the current schedule that they have at AVEC. But to offer training for the world of work, we have to take a look at how we offer the training. You know, they have a 2-year program that's stretched over a long period of time, 50% reduction in students over the 12-year period. We can look at shortening those programs because the current curriculum that allow for the programs to be offered in a much shorter time frame. I would definitely increase the retention of those students as well.
Yeah, he did make reference to shortening the length of the programs with the hope of increasing retention.
And at the same time, then, so we increase the student population. We have PEP going into the PEP students or STEP students, workers going into AVEC to get the necessary training. So those are things that are going to happen continuously into 2018. I mean, there is really a lot that's going to happen. 2018 for us is really a critical year when it comes to this project. We should see in 2018 the start of construction at these sites as well. So these are major things to take place.
You have a busy year coming up.
Yeah. Yes.
Is it going to be still that someone can enroll in the STEP program, or is that just going to become a part of the National Training Institute?
That's a question I can't necessarily answer entirely. But,
I think it would apply for all the arms. I just wanted clarity on whether or not the names of all of them will change.
The intent, though, is that training is offered by the National Training Institute.
Yes.
No other training mechanisms within the government to offer that type of training. The National Training Institute will be the training authority for St. Kitts and Nevis, right? So you want skill training, you go here. If there's folks who are currently on STEP, they will be funded through NTI, or even at CFBC if they're going to get a different program that's not offered at NSTP, at the National Training Institute.
So for the National Youth Skills programs and the projects and programs, those are just going to be selections that when you attend the National Training Institute, you can decide, okay, this is what I want to do, or this is what I want to do. I'm just trying to figure out how easy it's going to be to recognize the different areas. If you want pre-vocation, that's what you call it, pre-vocational skills, or informal training, will you be able to go and say, this is what I want, or it's going to be offered there without saying Project Strong courses or youth skill?
Well, there will be no Project Strong and no.
It's just going to all be one thing.
National skills. It will be one thing.
Okay.
If the flexibility that is offered, the functionality that is offered at National Skills currently, those functionality goes into the National Training Institute. So even for employers who wants to offer short-term training for their employees, they get with that division of the National Training Institute who will put together the training package that they need, and it's offered under the umbrella of the National Training Institute.
Okay.
Whether getting a national vocational qualification or Caribbean vocational qualification, if they can complete a whole training course, or they get unit competency for the areas that they complete. So there won't be any need for PEP to have their own training someplace or skills to have their own training someplace. Everything will be offered at the National Training Institute.
Okay, I think I'm all clear now. I wanted to be sure of that. I had a question about guidance counselors. I don't know if you mentioned it or if I missed it, but does that fall within the education sector plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we're talking about improved student support services, guidance and counseling is at the core of that. So all of our efforts to improve student support services will likely at the school level be managed mostly within a guidance and counseling division. So there will be lots of training for guidance and counselors, and then their role in providing some of the behavioral support, the psychosocial support, those kinds of things will be taken up as well. So they're a key role. They play a key role in all of our schools' intentions to support learners. So they are there embedded under improved student support services.
So what's the sensitization plan going to be when this is finally launched?
Wow. Well, we're working with the media unit, the Ministry of Education media unit, to figure out the right kinds of communication strategies. Leading up to this, we've had a number of different outreach opportunities, consultations, like I said, within and outside of education. We've been on other radio programs and TV programs to talk about the education sector plan when it was still in draft form and to get feedback. And so really it will be some more of the same, and then also hopefully some innovative approaches. I mean, I think we should be using social media more. But again, it's where a communication strategy really comes in, and we're hoping that the Ministry of Education Media Unit, SKNIS, can help us think about the right approach to that as well. Public forums, town halls, all those are kinds of things that we've done in the past, and we want to continue into the future to make sure we have the buy-in for effective implementation, because we can't do this alone. There has to be partnership to really make the plan happen.
When the two of you have such big projects working on, plan and project, what are some of the expectations you have, and what are some of the things you would like to see happen?
Can I start?
Sure.
I would love to see, so we didn't really get into the nitty gritty, but in the implementation part of this, there's a column called Primary Responsibility and Key Collaborators. The Planning Division led the charge in putting together a plan with buy-in from everyone around the challenges we identified and the strategies we need to implement. But each one of those strategies that I discussed and the activities have persons who have lead responsibility in making sure that they happen, and the primary collaborators who are supposed to support them in their effort. I need them to own their roles. Once the strategy is put out, my office has responsibility for certain aspects: the knowledge management for decision making, the policy coordination, and monitoring and evaluating the plan. But making sure that the rubber hits the road in our schools, that's the work of another particular office, and we need to make sure that office does its work. Making sure some of the financial stuff happens is the work of another office. We need to make sure that office does its work. So we all really need to, just as we all invested in the creation of this plan, we have to make sure that it's not Dr. Pemberton's plan, it's not Kertney Thompson's project, it's a Ministry of Education initiative, and all of us have ownership for seeing through its effective implementation. So I need primary responsible persons to be primarily responsible.
What I ultimately want to see from this program is full participation from our locals. We're really embarking on this to really give our folks a leg up. We have too many folks who are sitting on job construction sites and those things who have no real certification. And we see what's happening over in the hospitality area. A lot of work permits being issued, a lot of folks coming in with Caribbean skill certificates. Our folks have got to take advantage of this system that we're putting together. I understand. Some folks are probably out there saying, well, why isn't it there? We are basically setting up a system that never existed before. It's taken a lot of time, it's taken a lot of work, a lot of effort, but I really expect our folks to really embrace it and participate. We're going to have employers that we're going to be going to talk about sector skills committees that are going to help with the establishment of the national qualification standards. They're going to tell us what each employee is supposed to be able to do in particular areas. And so we expect those employers to assist us as well, because ultimately they're going to benefit by getting a quality, well-trained, competent, and certified employee.
Okay. But I really want to wish both of you all the best with your projects, and we definitely can have you back on the program as we go along to find out where you are, what you've achieved, and what's coming up next. And Dr. Pemberton, we're going to be listening out for the launch and what takes place. Hopefully the media unit with education can provide some coverage for that.
Actually, we hope to stream it live, so that's something that we hope to collaborate with SKNIS and make sure that everyone who wants to see the launch will be able to.
That sounds fantastic. That sounds fantastic. And like I said, we need to utilize social media more.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the best ways you can reach people. So we're almost out of time. In closing, what would you like to leave in the minds of our listeners and viewers?
I guess I would love to solicit the support of all of our listeners and viewers in making this plan really take hold. The Ministry of Education has taken great effort to put something in place that would really redound to the benefit of all of St. Kitts and Nevis. All of our citizens, residents, persons living here, young and old, will benefit from the implementation of this strategy. And I really just crave the support and partnership of the public in helping us to see this plan to fruition.
What I would really like to see is participation from more folks. So the government, the Ministry of St. Kitts, the Ministry of Education and the government of St. Kitts and Nevis embark on this project to take a loan, money that we have to pay back, to build a system for all folks. We are building a system so that our folks can be able to access training, get the competencies, the skills, and the certification to be able to build careers for themselves and their families. So take advantage of this. Don't let the government waste the $8 million that we're borrowing and let it just sit there and our institutions stay empty. Take advantage of the training opportunities, embrace it, and basically that's it. Just take advantage.
When you launch your marketing strategy or you implement your marketing strategy, I think you might have to focus a little bit on the importance of being certified. Not so much just TVET, but the importance of being certified at any level in any area, post-secondary and post-secondary and beyond.
That's definitely a part of it. In fact, there's already a curriculum marketing campaign. So we customize that to suit us, which really push the certification process. Currently, someone from Jamaica having a CVQ can move to St. Kitts using a curriculum skill certificate. We want to make sure that our folks in St. Kitts can do the same. And you can move freely within the curriculum region. But in order to do that, you must be certified. You can't just say, I am a Mason, and get a skill certificate. You have to actually present that certification. So yes, we're going to talk about the benefits of being certified. I mean, you can't go and tell an employer, I am a mechanic, when you don't really have the skills or you don't have the certification to say it. So that will be key.
Well, I want to thank both of you for joining me here on our Working For You program today. We had Dr. Neva Pemberton, who is Chief of Education Planning in the Ministry of Education, along with her colleague, Mr. Kertney Thompson, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the St. Kitts Nevis TVET Secretariat. And we were talking about two really massive projects, the Education Sector Plan 2017 to 2021 and the TVET Enhancement Project, which is a very big project, and that's going to end. Do you have an expected end date?
It's a 5-year project.
It's a 5-year project as well.
2016 to 2021.
To 2021. I want to thank you guys so much. I thought it was very informative, and there's so much that we really need to follow up on. I also want to thank our viewers and our listeners for joining us this afternoon. Remember, Working For You is carried live every Wednesday on ZIZ, Win FM, and Sugar City Rock from 1 to 1:30 to 3 p.m. and it's rebroadcast on Freedom FM and Vaughan Radio on Thursday from 7:30 to 9 a.m. and again at 10:30 to 12 p.m. respectively. The program was also streamed live on Facebook. And up next at 3 p.m., I'm told, is the Prime Minister's monthly press conference. That too will be carried live on ZIZ Radio and other national radio stations, as well as our Facebook account, where we will stream that live as well. So for all you need to know and keep up with what's happening in government and all its departments, you definitely can stay with our Facebook page, SKNIS Media, once you log into your Facebook account. My name is Jacqueline Bryan. I was your host for today. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Lesroy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.